On yet another one of those days, as he liked to call them, a man looked deeply down into his soul and sighed. I simply do not know how much longer I can contend with a life such as this. To which his soul replied, why are you telling me you ain't even got a soul? And even if you did, why are you looking down? It wouldn't be down, you dummy. And the man was exceedingly disappointed to hear his own soul speak in such a rude fashion. Hey, sometimes you have those kind of days, as I never like to say. A scene. Ring. Hello? Yes, is this the architectural exorcist? Yes, it is. What can I do for you? Well, I have this locked, empty room, and believe it or not, but I hear voices coming out of it. Oh, I believe you all right. You do? Well, certainly. I am a professional in the field. A man once asked himself, what is the one area of human experience in which experience means nothing? You mean other than above the neck, he replied. Sometimes when, for no accountable reason, this one guy'd be moping around and whining about being alive, he'd say to himself, yeah, but you'll be sorry when I'm dead and gone. Then one time replied to himself, oh yeah, why don't you try me and see? And a viewer writes, it seems most unfair to spin little tales such as that, which tell us something that sounds so nice, but is obviously impossible. It is impossible, isn't it? Now that I've thought about it, just in case it's not, please let me know. Enclosed is my unlisted return address, hopefully on a contingency basis, etc. Into a locked room, a man once put a dog and a cat, and sure enough, every time he'd grab a glimpse of his own mind in action, there they'd be, still at it, always at it. After hearing this story, a man came by the station who wanted to know if, after you've once placed two creatures, like a dog and a cat, into a locked room, you can ever get them back out. You know, rather than giving one of my pretty standard observations right here regarding the inanity of such questions, I think that this time I'll note and give credit instead to the mind for being the sole source and creator of the inane. And I'm sure that the gentleman will be touched by this small act of kindness. That is, his mind may be. No real sensible or meaningful part of him will, of course. And a small plane carrying very large bombs buzzed the palace of the renegade ruler as a bullhorn strapped to his starboard wing blared out the warning. Stop all of this nonsense about locked rooms before it is too late. And the king in question, realizing the possibility of circumstances now crashing in around him, shot himself in the ear to help expedite the matter. It's just the news. And upon hearing of this affair, a health professional drove here to the station in a cab to complain that we should not be making light, as he put it, of such serious matters, as he put it, as shooting oneself in the ear or sticking one's eyes out and the like. He says that once you start along that path, it'll be no time before you're considering trying to turn off your mind. He says that he is a trained expert in this area and that this advice is free and that we should take it, as he put it. Can you believe it? All this fuss over a dog and a cat in a locked room. Jeez, what would Noah and Sigmund say if they could see us now? When one man's mind attempted to saddle him with the name, well, how would you put it? He was having none of it, thank you. A road guaranteed to go nowhere is one paved with your thoughts about you. Once upon a time, a mirror died and went to heaven. And as soon as St. Peter caught a glimpse of it, he demanded to know, Just what the hell do you think you're doing here? Yes, even supernatural forces have their limits, and attempting to judge reflections to some end is one indeed of them. And of your rights to commiserate. Aw, a poor little mirror died. Aw. And his mind quickly told him to put a lid on that kind of crap. Hey, all functions have got to protect their territory. Makes sense to me. Me too, chimed in the mirror. Yeah, but mirrors agree with anything, countered St. Pete. Now, where were we when we started this? Oh yeah, a road guaranteed to go nowhere is one paved with you thinking about you, which certainly contained mirror news to begin with. When they're born, each person swallows a whole live creature. When they become verbal, a whole live creature swallows them. When people don't know what to call something, they'll often give it an exotic name. So, I guess, as to make it sound more exciting than it may prove to be. Take, for example, the word mind and what it actually represents. A boy asked his father, "For my birthday this year, I want to learn to think." "How about a boombox instead?" the old man replied. Few children are so fortunate as to have parents who actually resemble adults. And of your rights, say, hold it. Haven't you in the past said that we're our own parents and offspring? Yeah, but I'm not responsible for what I say that you heard yesterday. And said viewer was alert enough to wonder if this all had something to do with nonverbal reality's omnidirectional expansion in a finite dimension, and the inherent difficulties of a discussion thereof. Thoughts are the only cars driven in this country that are not manufactured in this country. Two kinds of morons occupy locked rooms. Those who aren't aware of where they are, and then the rest of us. And a viewer faxes, "Am I one of the rest of us?" Please. Cool it, sir. Whining may get you into heaven, but it don't mean jack when it comes to confined spaces. And another viewer emails, "That is, confined inner spaces, correct?" Thoughts are the only virus suffered in this village that is not indigenous to this village. There was once a mighty ocean liner on which everyone sailed. Most weren't aware of the circumstances, and even those who heard of them assumed that they were physical in nature. Silly passengers. Early on, one father so advised his son, "Get your mind off yourself." Few children are so blessed with such unexpected direction. At his fruit stand, instead of fruit, one man sold signs, and the one he is pushing today reads, "There are two realities, verbal reality and reality, and sometimes people prefer one of them over the other, but the most important functional difference between them is that people do not generally distinguish between the two." Although he's yet to sell one, he says that several people who stopped said they'd come back when he had in some fresh asparagus. In the struggle between the market and mental nourishment and that in physical, there is no meaningful struggle. In a locked room, you eat what's there, and that's that. None but the few attempt to break out and go on an empty-handed safari. Oh, yoo-hoo, Mr. Hippo, over here. Thoughts are the only sounds heard in this hall, not produced in this hall. One man had his furniture reupholstered, then reupholstered again, then again, and again, and again, and again, but to no benefit. Want to know why? Because it came with a room. And no matter what you do to such items, they're always going to seem to relatively remain matched to the scheme of the original setting and thus appear unchangeable. And if you're right, phew, so appear unchangeable, you say. Finally, some hope of relief. So how does one go from finding one's furniture, one's mind, as we know you're actually talking about, how does one go from finding one's furniture to be apparently inalterable to being, in fact, alterable? Tell us, please. Well, sir, since you begged me, okay, here's one trick. Don't ever let anyone into your room to look at your furniture. And another viewer's ottoman tweaked his toe and said, hey, you and I almost get that one. To which the man replied, it's you and me, not I. Plus, Ottoman in this instance has nothing to do with the mystical city of Istanbul, or the possibility that you and I in this instance, might be becoming more enlightened. What am I doing? Now I'm talking to furniture. End quote. Thoughts are the only paintings hung here, not done here. Reviewer writes, if ordinary people understand as little about life as you indicate they do, where the hell does he get this, indicate they do? Say they do, sir. Pardon me, back to the viewer's letter. If ordinary people understand as little about life as you indicate they do, then how do you explain that many ordinary people, just like me, hold it! Where the hell does he get off mentioning ordinary people and then slipping himself right in with them? Sorry. Back to the letter. If ordinary people understand as little about life as you indicate they do, then how do you explain that many ordinary people, just like me, watch your show? I rest my case. One man had a double-barreled dictionary. It could fire in two directions. One man had a double-barreled mind. It could turn on itself. One man had a double-barreled barrel, and he was able to both be in the barrel and simultaneously screw himself. Remember this. Things in a finite reality are never so bad that they couldn't be twice as good as they seem now. At least. And a viewer writes, why is that? Because, dear viewer, just because you asked. There was once an explorer who decided to sail off the edge of the earth on his mind. And his mind said, whoa, not hardly. And in disappointment, the queen forced him to take even more of her gold and jewels, when it was the desire to abandon possessions that in part drove his spirit of exploration. And a viewer writes to sympathize, "Aw, poor little explorer." And his mind said, "You better have said that." Though not listed on the public programs, there are two battles in which men are engaged. One is to stay alive, and the other is to stay as you are. One battle makes sense. The other is for chumps. I beg your pardon. It's for decent, normal people. Now, the rest of you riffraff, out of here. The public games are about to begin. Since when did they ever stop? Okay, you ruffians, I told you. Out of here. So I reminded everybody that this is, no matter what this sounds like, it's about the mind. Thoughts are the only terrorist here, not struggling for gains available here. Looking up from his bed, one man so said, "A nice thing about being physically ill is that it helps take your mind off your mind." Well, just for that, suddenly injected his doctor, my bill has doubled. But the man just laid back and smiled, knowing it was all in his mind. An elephant and giraffe were talking, and the pachydermania said, "Why do humans keep putting us in stories wherein we appear to be even more intelligent than they are?" And the extended one thought on this for a moment and said, "Maybe it's because we don't have any locked rooms." And the elephant was downright delighted with this response, stomped a grinning foot, and declared, "That's it, by Jove, you've got it. Fables, once and for all, dissected and explained away for your fun and profit. Not, come to think of it, to mention religion, psychology, and the gross jungle debt." A comment the giraffe found not unamusing, but also surprising in that he had never known the hefty one had an interest in economics. Thoughts are the only building material on this planet that doesn't originate on this planet. Thus, as you may have sometimes noted, their structures don't always stand. There was once a man who visited a state that he had been wanting to go to, and it was a lot of fun, and he sure wasn't disappointed with it. But unbeknownst to him was a danger pit into which he unawares stepped, which is in believing that just because you got to where you wanted to go, that there is nowhere else to go. Got that? Good. Now let me tell it to you straighter. The danger pit is in accepting that where you've been, that you wanted to go, is in accepting where you've been that you wanted to go to be the final word in where it is that you want to go. You know why most people are blind? Because they only look as far as they can look. Thoughts are the only people on this planet who can be both your friend and not your friend, who can be here and yet not be here, who can pee on your foot and then try to wipe it off, who can give you misleading information and then to make up for it, criticize you for being dumb enough to accept it. If it weren't for our friends' thoughts, well, most people wouldn't even have a real friend. Does this explain why most people who are aware they swallowed a hippo live alone? And if you're right, how does being aware that you've done something differ from having simply done it? The game improves. That's the distinction between twirling around a pistol on your finger incessantly and catching a bullet in midair once. And a man asked a mystic, "Sometimes it sure can sound like you know what you're talking about." "Yeah, I know," he replied. "Sad to say, but yeah, you're right." A viewer writes, "I find some of your stories and comments too long, and some of them too short, but I find all of them unnecessary." Wait a minute. Is it really my thoughts I'm talking about here? And now a word from your sponsor. Are we back? Oh, okay. A man went to a restaurant and said, "Feed me." Oh, and finally, a viewer writes, "I didn't get that last one at all. I mean, even less than at all than I normally don't get them." FYI, he wrote later that same day asking if what he had revealed in his earlier contact was perhaps some sign of progress. But the sad truth is that he misspelled the word progress, and I thought he was rambling on something to do with Goldilocks and the bears. A man went to Life and said, "Feed me." And Life replied, "What have I been doing?" Thoughts are the only fertilizer on this farm that won't grow anything on this farm. Gun safety and the home. In the home. The primary danger of firing a gun in a locked room is the ricochet factor. You can, unintentionally, hurt yourself. And the viewer writes, well, how in blazes name would anyone hurt themselves other than unintentionally? How in blazes indeed, sir, except. Have you ever taken a good glance at your mind in operation? And the viewer, now beside himself, or at least next to a close family member, immediately replied, my mind is not going to hurt me. What kind of conversation have I been duped into? Don't ask me, sir. Ask your mind. And the viewer, now fit to be tied, or at least in a size we can accommodate, fires back at us. The first time I ever saw your damn show and realized you was going to be talking about the mind rather than something really interesting, I should have turned it off then and kept it off. I don't need these kinds of aggravating ideas from you. I've got my own. Well, you know what I mean. Well, what I mean to say is that I have my own mind and it has its own, well, and our communication with the gentleman here suddenly ceased. A man wrote to his doctor, you can't bamboozle me. The doctor wrote back saying that the man surely intended this letter for his mother. So, the man wrote to his mother, you can't bamboozle me. And she wrote him back suggesting that he had sent it to her in error and really meant to go to his priest. So, the man wrote to his priest, you can't bamboozle me. And the priest wrote him back with the comment that such a message was wasted on him and held up the mayor as the more promising recipient. So, the man wrote to the mayor and said, you can't bamboozle me, and don't try to tell me I've got the wrong party. There's nobody else left. His Honor, as he slipped his hand seductively under her blouse and pushed her down on his official city desk, whispered softly into the ear of his mind, well, kiddo, as hard as it is to believe, we fooled him again. On Career Appreciation Day, one kid scribbled in the margins of the test, if a plastic surgeon can hang himself and a mole can cut his own self off at the pass, then how come a man with a sealed empty box can't throw the damn thing away? And just as teacher was about to slap him, he fell into a dream. Thoughts are the only source of foul odors on this planet. From still another view, mystics could be described as those who turn chinchillas into Bigfoot. Or as those pursuing weed eradication rather than soil conservation. Thoughts are the only rooms in this city that don't seem to, well, to be honest with you, that don't seem to have a way out. I don't know, is it just me? Am I just too dumb to see it? One day when someone came to visit him, one man, after introducing himself, then introduced his mind to the visitor, who said, I am most surprised at this unexpected turn of events. Once, deep in the jungle, two lions were engaged in a ferocious battle, obviously to the death, when one of them said to the other, what are you thinking right this instant? Shows they don't fight like gentlemen. Hey gang, it's question time. Question number 1. What's worse than being trapped? Question number 327. pretty close to the last one, I'd suspect. What's stupider than being trapped when you don't have to be? Hup. I was wrong. Here's the actual last question. What's dumber than being trapped when being trapped is just an illusion? Okay, Mr. Questionnaire Pants, that's just about enough. I've got a nice, shiny new bullet right here with your name on it. Thoughts are the only drive-by shooting in this hood involving perps and victims not from this hood. We're not talking donuts here, my friends. The mind covers consciousness in a glaze. Though it bothered him right smart every time he'd consider it, still, one man couldn't help but periodically weigh the possibility that the only trick available is not to think all the time of redwood trees, but in the alternative, to never ever let those mighty forest giants cross your mind. Oh, that hoits, he exclaimed when considering this. Oh, it hoits. So nice. Not the pride, but the folly of certain ownership. Anything you think about, in part, owns you for as long as you think about it. A nice shiny bullet, did you say? And with my name on it. Well, you still rolling? Yep. I guess that settles that then. See, I was going to motion to give it a nice fade out. And well, let's see. What were we talking about? There was a whole series of news items tonight. I don't know why. Just one of those days, as that one guy likes to call them, having to do with thoughts. I will assume that, well, the possibility that you caught the connection between them. There was an original one some weeks back wherein it was noted that thoughts are the only crop harvested, reaped on this planet that are not sown on this planet. And based upon the overwhelming response and inquiries, dramatic, sarcastic hyperbole, or just sarcasm. Based upon that, I decided that it was fit to bring in additional news that I knew had been breaking on this planet for a good while now, 7,000 to 8,000 years, but that I thought would bring up to date. Thoughts are the only, there were 4 or 5 before this, but thoughts are the only terrorist here, not struggling for gains available here. From a certain view, if you looked at it, and we're speaking totally beyond the ordinary views of psychological pathology. We're not speaking of people, ordinary people who say that their mind is driving them crazy or that they are crazy. We're not speaking of that. We're speaking of people who, by every other observation, are about as square, middle of the road, and ordinary as necessary to pass. That'll do. But then after that, if someone attempts to have to affect a change in the mind, a change in consciousness, then you find, after you've made some substantial progress, that there is nowhere to look for any opposition to what you're doing. If that's what you enjoy, then you should stay a religiousist. And don't write and tell me there's no such word. There's any word that you make up. You might as well stay with religion if you feel that there is opposition from without. But a man who understands anything at all involved with such activities as this shortly realizes there is absolutely nowhere to look for opposition. For a long time you feel, dramatically speaking, helpless. Feel less than adequate to triumph every day in trying to stabilize consciousness and trying to discover what it is that a handful of people have so long talked about, of some other state of consciousness in which people look at life and go, well, I'll be damned. Or words to that effect. Eureka. What ho? Are you serious? Wow. Commonly referred to as a great mystical experience. But a person who has made any progress at all, even though it feels as though you are attempting to swim through an infinite sea of warm peanut butter, it seems as though everywhere that you attempt to take a poke at something that apparently is involved with keeping you in your normal state, it turns out to be you. It turns out to be a matter of shadow boxing, that you can undertake some so-called metaphysical discipline, some ritual, and train and train and train and train and think, well, by God, after all these months or years of sitting and not moving or whirling around in a circle and throwing up or chanting one of the names of God or somebody, that by God, I am in fighting shape now, and you find out there is nobody there. And you find out that all your training thus far, all the victories that you have had, all of the at least close decisions you've had have been, sad to say, against your shadow. So there you are left in fighting prime, more theatrical hyperbole perhaps, but there you are in fighting shape, and you finally realize there is no one opposing me. Which is another getting off the track, which, don't write and say what else is new, but is another reason that people are so attracted to the ideas of good and evil and supernatural forces, resulting eventually in what people normally think of as religion, but the idea that there is something opposing you. And if you'll notice, even people who are not religious in the formal sense, people who would swear that they are simply not, that they do not believe in higher or external forces, atheists, agnostics, atheists, they still feel, if they're civilized and ordinary, even a good atheist is going to be, by some definition, a humanist. That is, he will still be in favor of society progressing and us being more decent and charitable, and etc. But he too will feel the absolute oppressiveness, the oppressive existence of some opposing force. Which what else would no feeling oppression be, come to think of it? I don't know. I'm not Daniel Webster. He's not the one who wrote the dictionary. Well, we try to be informative here, and I appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much. No, there's no contest for you knowing his name was Noah. I mean, you see how Daniel Webster and the thing about dictionary, so don't bring up Noah Webster. I'm waiting for him to leave. The human mind always feels the presence of an opposing force. I point out in times past, you can see it yourself, the mind cannot even think without pushing against something. That is why we do not have a vocabulary consisting of one word. That is why I've even pointed out of all these stories, such as the Western Christian Judaic version of God finally saying the word, or the idea that nothing happened until God said the word. And even there is another example of the mind missing it, because it does not do for one word to be said. It had to be the second word. That if there was some extra systemic force, and the God did say, whatever he said, let there be life, let there be humans, let there be earth, that wouldn't work. He could say that, but nothing happens until he says, let there be humans. And so let's say that, boom, but nothing actually happened until Adam, till some man went, what the hell was that? Until he said, let there be let there be life. Until he said one word, there had to be the second word. If the first word was life or whatever it was, Shazam, bingo, that won't do it. You can't have one word and anything makes sense. You can't have one number. I don't care if it's one of your favorite numbers. Yeah, I know most of you like 27. But you can't have 27 by itself. Think about it. Call that guy back in that was talking about Daniel Webster. The mind, it is simply it's part of the whole situation of where we are within an odd-numbered dimension. But you should see by now, I don't know whether people ever make much of this or not. It's just an obvious, or it's a simple fact. I don't know whether it's obvious. But you cannot have one of anything. The mind cannot deal with it. It's simply, you can have one of anything. The mind could be starving if the mind could starve. But if we were in some position, if we were in certain physical circumstance or back in the evolutionary march of human progress, if we were back some way to where there was only one thing and your mind was starving and there was that one piece of the most delicious mental food in the world, it wouldn't be there. But I'm telling you, it could be there and it wouldn't be there. The mind could not see it. There has to be two things. Well, just look at it. You go, well, that could be true. I rest my case. And then your mind goes, yeah, but that could be a bunch of shit. Yeah, it could. But at least it can be something. Yeah, you're right. It's one or the other. I rest my case. I don't get it. As soon as you can have one or the other, you're done for. According to how you look at it. You can now think, or the alternative, weird version, using dramatic license again, the weird version is, yeah, I can now think. But as soon as you can think, if Adam's son was the first mystic, then Adam went, well, now I can think. And somewhere shortly thereafter, his son went, either metaphorically or otherwise speaking, a son went, yeah, now I can think, and my thinking's all mucked up. As soon as you can think, if you're wired up to do this, and of course, saying as soon as you can doesn't have anything to do with the temporal framework, because it doesn't happen immediately. It doesn't happen to you when you were 5 years old. But the point is, within your lifetime is immediately. That as soon as you can think, and as soon as you understand what this is about, then as soon as you can think, you think, boy, my thinking's all fucked up. I should have deleted my thinking. Well, I meant for you or anybody. It's not that your individual thinking is mucked up. As soon as you can think, all right, I'll take the whole compression, or I'll make a whole compression instead of Adam and his son, all that, if it messed it up. He would be the first man. And of course, you're the first man also. As soon as you became conscious, as soon as you became verbally conscious, you were Adam to you. So as soon as you become verbal, as soon as there's a verbal reality, as soon as you can think, your feeling is, it was Adam, the whole thing about the garden. You didn't know where you are, but as soon as you can think, you go, wow! And people don't do it this way, but you go, wow, I can think, is what you're saying. Because if you couldn't think, you'd never go, wow. Have you ever seen a moose go, wow? Have you ever suspected that robins, I mean, as happy as they seem to be and always singing, bopping around, but still, do you have the feeling that sometimes robins just get up in the morning and look around and go, wow? No offense, I'm not trying to insinuate anything about their particular mood or their, but you just do not look at it, or a tree or bush. You do not have any sensation of them going, looking around life and going, wow! Only humans will do that. And they only do it really once with any passion, and that's when they become conscious. That's when Adam heard God, if you want to use that kind of allegory. And he went, wow! Then he had two things. The mind was then in operation. The brain was working at an ordinary level. But if you can follow this, I'm trying to compress it now, not talking about ordinary people, but those wired up to be interested in such as this, then what happens with the would-be mystical atoms is, wow, I can think. Fast forward, somewhere in his life, he goes, damn thinking. And neither one of those are correct. Those are not objective, standalone statements, because there's nothing wrong with thinking. There's nothing right with thinking. You cannot avoid thinking. A man could never even a man could not say the second part. A man could never say, figuratively speaking to himself, damn thinking, if he had never thought. There is inherent, back to the main track. Yeah, I know it's about time. The mind has to have something to push against. The mind has to have something opposing it. The tongue must have the palate against which to work. To even say the mind must have a palate and a tongue. For the mind to say Afghanistan. For a man to say, are you back here? For the mind to work. As soon as the mind works, it is inherent in it, is back to the real main road where we left. The mind, as part of its structure, feels that there is opposition. This is not a cut from a whole boat fantasy, because the body has an awareness that there is opposition. The body has the awareness that right below its feet there is this huge, what do you call it around here? Planet. Mother Earth is below his feet all the time going, hey, I'll be hungry. I'm in no hurry. The body knows. I shouldn't bring this up because the body doesn't really know in that sense. It doesn't know about death. It's only the mind that knows. But the body knows that it is struggling to survive. The body knows without the mind. The body knows when it is hungry, and it knows that hunger is in opposition to its best interest. Of course, it doesn't know any of this in the mental sense. It's what ordinary people would call survival instincts. But it knows it to such a degree that it will operate on the basis that hunger will make any animal get up and move to feed the hunger, to satiate the sexual drive, to get out of the weather, to find a better climate. So it is nothing that the mind's made up. It's not a folly. But insofar as it being necessary for survival, insofar, once you see it, for it even be necessary for the mind to be operating on the basis that for it to survive, that it must be in continual, or must be aware of a continual sense of oppression, a continual sense of danger. The easiest one, back to, with everyone realizing this in no wise is any negative statement to religion. It's just that religion's in charge of this. And it's not an attack. I'm pointing out what it does. The religion cannot exist without a sense of opposition. Some evil force in the world, and as I said, though, even nowadays, perhaps it's easier for more people to see that those who claim not to be religious still feel, and have always felt, that there is opposition from uncivil, feral humans on this planet. So there you are with the feeling that there is something opposing me, that there is either evil forces or there's uncivilized potential still extant in humans about which you must be wary, about which we must concern ourselves, that we must find those who are disruptive to society, even if you don't believe in the great horned evil one infecting people's soul. If you just say, well, humans have not progressed enough that we have outbred all of the feral instincts. And therefore we need education. We need to send symphonies around to our schools. All homes need not a television set, but a bust of Goethe to go on their grand piano. That worked. At any rate, it took a long time to get to this. By now, all of you know enough about the human mind, enough of cold-blooded observations of life to realize that all in all 99% of the population, as far as you can see, just everybody, believes that there is some negative / evil, negative, uncivilized, negative, destructive, negative, devolutionary forces on this planet. That there is something always ready to spring upon right-thinking, decent, religious, civilized, progressive-thinking people. You realize the nature of the mind, and you realize there is nothing opposing you. The religious people and would-be mystics, the public would-be mystics, they are in the forefront always of thinking, feeling, proclaiming that they must constantly be on guard because that their activities, and now I should really move it to the more specialized area of the public, self-identified, ipsy-dixit mystics rather than the religious, because just ordinary religious people kind of let it slide and they don't get all that worked up. But the would-be mystics, the dilettantes, believe that they are involved with such an extraordinary activity that they will even think to themselves, why is it called mystical? The great secret hidden work. Why is it so hard to find? Why is it so elusive? They all, at some time, will believe, and it fits, that this is so hard, that this is such a small, specialized activity, so damn difficult to find, much less to make any progress therein. There's only one answer. The mind doesn't really have to think much. It's that there is something opposing it. And even if we fast forward on them, which is really being overly charitable, because most of them stay there, but if any of them get past that point, that is, of identifying that there's something specific, then they get to the idea that life itself seems arranged, that life doesn't want us doing this, that life perhaps is trying to guard its own secrets. There is simply the feeling that there is something, and a few people can even get beyond that. A few people can get beyond that, and it usually comes out something like this, that maybe life is arranged in such a way that it doesn't want us to do this. And for those of you that think you might be hearing a torted deja vu, even I have pointed out, that should be obvious, that things are arranged in life to make this extremely difficult because you are pushing against the whole momentum, the whole structure of the way things are. But it's not that something's opposing you. That's just in case any of you actually have some sort of connected memory with all of this now. Ordinary people, back to them, ordinary mystics would be those who believe they're interested in such as this. Even if they get beyond the idea, the common one, that there's some evil force. And there are plenty of mystical so-called schools and models throughout history that have said that at one time men were more conscious, that men were on the level of gods, speaking consciously, that men were at one time in better shape. And in some way that there was a struggle somewhere in the universe, and it gets into all kinds of mythical and nowadays science fiction stories, that evil forces from other parts of the universe, other parts of reality, looking after their own interest, is simply a replay of the whole idea of Lucifer and God fighting over who's in charge, and temporarily the good guys won. But here it is that for some reason God, the good forces, let the bad ones survive. But do they learn a lesson? No. They still sneak around, they're still always nipping at your heels, they're still always there opposing us. So assuming, that means assuming. So assuming, for those of you that might be dixylexical, what is it when you can't even say the word? I don't know, check your dictionary there, Brother Webster. See if you can find out what the word would be for that. That if you get past the point that you believe that there's actually some specific anthropomorphical, demonic, evil, negative, destructive force stopping people, stopping you from changing your mind. And if you go from that to, it would be a form of graduation, if you want to put it that way, which is meaningless ultimately, but it would be a form of progress that you get past that to the idea, to the picture. You still feel the opposition. That is, you still feel the, by and large, impotence insofar as being able to affect a permanent change in here. So, but rather than seeing it as being specific demonic forces or some figure itself or some actual force specifically involved with opposing man's individual efforts along these lines, you begin to see it as, hey, life's arranged in such a way that maybe it doesn't want us to do this. Maybe some of us are arranged and wired up in such a way that we've sort of got pieces of how things are going, or that we're sort of wired up as men will be in the future, and it's just kind of a bleed over that life doesn't really want people doing this, and so that's why it's so hard. Then you get past that, let's say. Still call it a little progress, if you must. And I guess the point, rather than seeing that life doesn't want you to do that, you and anybody else, you just begin to have a picture of, well, things are just arranged, that life really doesn't care one way or the other. That things are simply arranged in such a way that some people, and I'm assuming I'm speaking generically on your part, and say that some people, some of us, are wired up in such a way, just accidentally, just a few people, that they have what amounts to a partial wiring of where man is headed, a partial wiring of man tomorrow, and that's why I am more upset than other people. That's why I'm more anxious. That's why I keep wondering about things and blah, blah, blah. But it's simply arranged that life is not prepared. The circumstances physically are not arranged in such a way for this to occur. And so that's the feeling of it being such a futile, such a hard fought, such a endless struggle. There's one more step that can still be described, and that is people can get past that point, which is where I've been trying to drag you people's attention for the last few months, up to the level past all of that, and it's all turned internally. That forget the other three about there being an actual evil, anthropomorphical, or a specific force, like a horned Satan. There's not that, and it's not even life itself, that is, circumstances specifically trying to stop you or anybody from doing this, and it's not life inspecifically. That is, just because of the mechanical circumstances of the universe itself, that it's just almost impossible to do this. You just got a hint of it, a taste of it, but the time's not right, circumstance's not right, and so nobody can really do this. All you can do is struggle with it. All right, past that is to see that it is all, everything that I've just described, plus anything else you can think of, it's all in the mind. So you still feel that there's opposition. You still feel, well, there's some opposition, or else I've got now a description, or I've adopted one from a book, or from me, from somewhere. You go, well, I got some idea what it is I should do, so if there was an opposition, by God, I'd be doing it. I know right now what I can do along the lines that I have in mind, that I can make myself more conscious right this second. So I can do it right this second, and then it's gone. I can do it another second, and then it's gone. And then I think about 5 minutes from now, I can do it again, and then it's gone. So something is making it get gone. It's not me. I don't say, well, I'm going to make myself more conscious for, 3 seconds, and then I'll go, it's not me doing it. It's not me doing it. So even if it's not Satan, it's not Lucifer, it's not Pee Wee Herman or somebody, and it's not life, and it's not circumstances out there, that it's all in here. It is my mind itself opposing itself. When you can see that, that's like getting to the top of the highest mountain you can find. But then you got to go higher. Thoughts are the only terrorist here, not struggling for gains available here. The very thing that seems to be opposing, however you look at yourself, the kinds of thoughts which I insist if you look, you'll discover, if you're wired up to do this, that the quality, that is, the specific thoughts you're having, are of no consequence. Just because to you it's obvious that, well, I have some horrible thoughts that continue to occur, of which I'm most ashamed, and I'm sure they have nothing to do with being more conscious. Are you serious? God almighty. Woo! Oh, turn yourself in. Point being, that's just bullshit. That's just a form of vanity. Well, I don't know whether it's more vanity or stupidity. All right, stupid vanity. Just think that you have horrible ideas of which no one suspects. Have you looked in the mirror lately? Do you live alone in a tree? People don't suspect. assuming, since we only got 90 seconds, that you're even past that point, that it's not specific thoughts, it is simply the mechanical flow of it. It is simply that in your skull, which seems to be the only place that any of this is taking place, it is the place that you have had experiences, many of you, so that you know that there is an absolute other state of non-weird, non-mystical consciousness that is everything, that satisfies everything you've been looking for, and yet, like, in one sense, it's no big deal. It's just, oh. But when you're not in that condition, then it's like you're struggling, like you're swimming up a river in which the current is so strong you can't find a way around it, you can't physically fight it. And assuming that you now see that it's not individual areas of the river, it's not in any particular thought, it is just the mechanical, the consistent, incessant flow of it, that surely, now we're getting somewhere. Surely that is an allegorical statement of the reality of what is opposing me. Whew. Finally. What do you mean finally? Are you an idiot? What, are you crazy? Now cut it off. And get that guy with the dictionary out of here.